Chapter 25. Carter. Carter pulled into the parking lot of April's office just as she was being loaded into the ambulance. The flashing red and blue lights from the ambulance and patrol car matched the fear and anger pulsating inside of him. He didn't know what exactly had happened, but whoever had hurt April would pay. He'd called the police as soon as he hung up with her and then jumped into his own car, and he was frustrated to see that they probably hadn't arrived much sooner than he had. Throwing his car in park, he darted toward the ambulance. His eyes shifted to the patrol car. There was a primal need to see who had hurt her, but the need to make sure she was okay won out, and he continued toward the ambulance. An EMT blocked his way with a held-up hand.
"Who are you, and why are you here?" "I'm her boyfriend. I was on the phone with her when the man approached her. I'm the one who called the police, and I am going to the hospital with her."
Carter would be respectful, but there was no way he wasn't getting in this ambulance. The EMT glanced over to the officers, but they were both busy with something else.
"Look, you can have them meet me at the hospital, and I will happily answer any questions. But that woman is having my baby, and I'm not letting this ambulance leave without me in it."
That caught the man's attention, and his eyes widened.
"She's pregnant?" "Yeah, about 6 weeks.
The change in the man's demeanor sent the fear skyrocketing in Carter's chest.
"Come on."
As Carter climbed in and saw April for the first time, his hand flew to his mouth. Her face was puffy, and angry purple bruises were sprouting up across her eyes, her chin, her cheeks. He could see similar bruises on her exposed arms. His eyes found the EMTs, who had climbed in beside him.
"Did they get the monster who did this?"
"They did."
"Did he—"
Carter's eyes traveled to April's stomach. There was barely a bump, and it was covered with clothes, but he had to know.
"Did he—"
He shook his head, unable to speak the words.
"Will the baby be okay?" "I don't know. The hospital will run an ultrasound as soon as we get there."
Carter hated the man's calm demeanor, though he understood it was part of the man's job. He had probably seen much worse than this. Knowing he would get nothing more from the EMT that would ease his heart, he did the best thing he knew to do: pray. Placing his hand over one of April's, he lifted her up to God in prayer. He was still praying when they arrived at the hospital. Though he felt the ambulance stop and heard the back door open, he did not stop praying, though he did open his eyes. Thankfully, Jefferson had told him often that you didn't have to close your eyes to pray. Climbing out after the paramedics had unloaded April, he followed them inside. They rattled off words he didn't understand to one of the nurses, and then April was whisked away. He tried to follow, but another nurse blocked his path. "I'm sorry, sir. You'll have to wait out here."
She's pregnant with my child,"
he said, feeling helpless as his eyes followed her, but his feet were forced to stay put. "It's okay. They'll take good care of her. Why don't you come with me and we'll start the paperwork?" She laid a soft hand on his arm and flashed an empathetic smile. Carter nodded, allowing her to lead him to a desk that appeared to be the center of activity. She let go of his arm long enough to shuffle through some papers before attaching them to a clipboard and handing them to him. "You can sit right over there," she said, pointing to a row of chairs against the wall. Carter took the pen and clipboard and shuffled over to the chairs. They were hard plastic chairs that would no doubt be uncomfortable after an hour, but he didn't focus on that. April was his focus right now. April and this paperwork. The first few lines were easy to fill out. Name, address, phone number. He knew all of those. But when it got to her medical history and insurance information, he realized how little he knew about any of that. Would Lucia know? Pulling out his cell phone, he called Jefferson. Even if she didn't know, he could use the support and the extra prayers right now.
"Hey man, what's up?"
Jefferson's friendly voice, which normally soothed Carter's nerves, did nothing to alleviate his anxiety this time.
"It's April. I'm at the hospital. They need medical history and insurance, and I have no idea. We never talked about any of that." "Whoa, Carter, slow down, man. Why is April in the hospital?"
It was weird how quickly words could change someone's demeanor. Jefferson no longer sounded like his easygoing self, his voice now commanding.
"There was a guy outside her office. We were on the phone, and then she told me to call the cops. The line went dead, and I called the cops. I swear I called them as soon as I could, but Jefferson, he beat her."
Carter could feel emotion strangling his vocal cords. He'd let her down. He was supposed to protect her, and he hadn't.
"Carter, it's okay. I believe you. Is April okay?" "I don't know. They won't let me see her yet. She was unconscious when I got to her office and the whole way to the hospital. She'll be all right, though, right, Jefferson? Tell me she'll be okay, Jefferson."
Though he knew Jefferson was not a doctor, he needed to hear the words. There was a pause, as if Jefferson was deciding what he should say. Finally, he took a deep breath.
"I don't know, Carter, but we'll pray that she is. Look, I'll ask Lucia if she can help with the information you need, and we'll be there soon."
Relief flooded Carter, and he sagged against the back of the chair. They would come. They would help him through this. At least he wouldn't be alone. But then he remembered that Jefferson had a daughter, and it was already late. He couldn't ask Jefferson to come. He could do this alone. He would have to.
"No, you've got Haley, man. I'll be okay."
But he wondered if that was really true. His heart felt like it was being squeezed and squished, and taking a breath seemed to require more strength than usual.
"I'll get Lorelai to watch Haley for a bit. You shouldn't be alone right now. In fact, I'm calling the rest of the guys too. Hold tight."
Carter didn't have the strength to argue, nor did he want to. Being surrounded by his teammates, who had become his friends in the last few weeks, sounded like music to his ears.
"Thank you. That's what family is for," Jefferson said,
before ending the call. Family. Is that what his teammates were? He certainly spent more time with them than his birth family. Maybe family really did have more to do with people who were there for you, rather than people who shared your genes. And April? She felt like family too. In fact, though he'd been thinking about it more and more lately, he knew now that April was the woman for him. And though he was still frightened his life might end up like his father's, for the first time he felt the need to try and make a relationship work. He took the paperwork to the counter, hoping to get some word on April's condition as well. The empathetic nurse offered a small smile as he approached.
"I filled out what I could,"
he said, handing her the clipboard.
"I've got some friends looking to see if we can get the rest."
"That's fine. We'll start with this and add in the rest later." She removed the papers and shoved them in a manila folder.
"Do you know how she is?" he asked.
Her eyes brimmed with kindness once again. "I haven't heard anything yet, but I promise I'll let you know as soon as I do, Mr.
Young, Carter Young."
She nodded and jotted his name down on the manila folder, the folder that Carter assumed would soon house April's information. What would it say? Would it tell him that his child was okay, or that the man's fists had ended his or her life before it could even begin?
"Carter Young?"
Carter turned and nodded at the police officer who was addressing him.
"That's me. I have some questions for you, sir."
"Of course." Carter didn't know much, but he would do everything he could to help put the man who hurt April away for as long as he could.